In this video, we're going to look at factoring this expression. So we want to end up with two smaller expressions this way, right? So let's do, this is a q. It's a funny looking q, but that's a q. So let's do the q squared first. I know that since there's a 1 in front of it, I'm going to write the q's this way. That if I multiply these two together, that's going to give me q squared. So that takes care of that guy. Now I want to look at the next two terms, these two. All right. I have to find two numbers that when I multiply them together, I get this number. And when I add or subtract those two numbers, I get this number. All right. So when I multiply the two factors together, I get the 40, and when I add or subtract them, I get the negative 13. So let's look at the factors of 40. Well, there's what? 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 3 won't go, 4 and 10, right? 5 and 8, 6 doesn't go into 40, 7 doesn't go into 40, 8 goes into 40, but we've already used it, so we're done. So one of these pairs of factors, if I multiply them together, I'll get 40, and if I add or subtract them, I'll get 13. Well, look at the first one, 1 and 40. Those numbers are way too far apart. There's no way I'm going to be able to add them or subtract them and get 13. So they're out. 2 and 20, the same thing, right? 2 and 20, they're too far apart. I'm not going to be able to add or subtract them and get the negative 13. 4 and 10 were closer, but 10 and 4 is 14 if I add them, and if I subtract them, 10 minus 4, I'm still not going to get minus 13. So these guys are all out, and I'm hoping 5 and 8 is going to help me. So 5 and 8, 5 times 8 is 40, so it satisfies this multiply. And is there any way to add or subtract these two numbers and get 13? Well, if I added them, I'd get 5 and 8. I'd get 13, but it would be the wrong sign, right? It would be a positive 13. So what if I used negative 5 and negative 8? The negative 5 times negative 8 would still give me positive 40, right? Negative times a negative is a positive. And if I add those two, I'll get negative 13. So those are the ones that I want to use. So my two factors are going to be the negative 5, q minus 5, and then the negative 8 will be the other one. Now we can check this, right? We can use what some of you have learned it as the FOIL method, right? I'm going to multiply the first two together, right? I'm going to multiply the outer two together, the inner two together, and the last two together, right? That's the FOIL. First, outer, inner, and last. So the first two, q times q, is q squared. Outer two, q times negative 8, right, is negative 8q. The inner two, negative 5 times q, right, negative 5q. And then the last two, a negative 5 times negative 8 is a positive 40. I can simplify this, right? I have two q's here. So I could do q squared, negative 8q and negative 5q is negative 13q plus 40. Is that what I started with? Yes, it is, so that's the answers. So the two factors are q minus 5 and q minus 8. Done.